Today on Tiny Voices, we put on our scarecrow masks and try to figure out why we love scary games and why the future of virtual reality horror is looking bright. That and more on episode 3 of Tiny Voices. Why is it that some of us enjoy scary movies, or scary games, or haunted houses? It might be because with fear comes a rush, a natural neurochemical high. It's the same feeling that thrill seekers, from roller coaster enthusiasts to skiers, experience. Speaking with the New York Times, Dr. Seymour Epstein, a psychologist at the University of Massachusetts, had this to say. If you ask accident-prone skiers if they're scared when they're on a high-risk slope, they'll say they wouldn't bother to ski the slope if they weren't scared. But that doesn't really explain why. There exist at least half a dozen completely viable-sounding theories for why we seek these intense experiences in the first place, but we still lack a definitive answer. Some theories posit that the experience of overcoming fear provides a boost to one's self-esteem and confidence, and thus we're drawn to fear because we find satisfaction in conquering it. Other theories posit that we seek out thrills and chills as an escape from the norms of everyday life. But again, it could all just be because we love those neurochemicals that accompany frightful experiences. To be a little bit more specific, you have a nervous system which is divided into the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The CNS is the control center for the body, and it's comprised of the spinal cord and the brain. The peripheral nervous system allows the brain to communicate with the extremities. It's also subdivided into the somatic and the autonomic nervous system. The somatic nervous system has to do with sensory input and motor control, while the autonomic nervous system controls involuntary functions like breathing and your heart rate. Fear is an autonomic response to stressful stimuli, meaning that it's involuntary. Once your brain identifies a stimulus as threatening, which is primarily the job of the amygdala, your hypothalamus triggers your fight or flight response. This process makes up the basis for fear, and from that fight or flight response, adrenaline, endorphins, and dopamine cascade through the brain, producing a natural rush. There is a great deal more to it than that, but this is about as simple a rundown as I can give while still being relevant to the topic, and something more in-depth would probably be better suited to a cognitive science classroom than here. Personality traits, specifically a trait known as sensation-seeking, seem to be a defining factor in determining whether that rush is exhilarating or traumatizing. I myself, and I would be willing to bet that a good portion of all of you, probably have that personality trait. If you love horror like I do, you should be very excited about virtual reality for a number of reasons, both theoretical and practical. One of those reasons is immersion, or presence. One of the biggest factors in creating an effective horror experience in games is the ability to immerse the player. Immersion, in psychological terms, is more accurately referred to as presence. Presence is a big topic on its own, and it may show up on an episode down the line. But for now, when I say presence, I'm referring to a sense of spatial detachment and absorption, leading to the sensation of actually being present in the game. This doesn't necessarily mean that you believe that the events of the game are real, or that you totally detach from reality, but while you're playing, you lose track of yourself spatially. It's a state of absorption closely tied to the flow state, something I talked about in episode 1 of Tiny Voices. One factor which greatly impacts presence is having multiple channels of sensory input. In virtual reality, your sight and hearing are not only stimulated, but less often thought of sensations such as proprioception, which is the ability to sense where parts of your body are in relation to one another, along with certain fine motor skills, also factor into sensory input that increases your presence while in a virtual reality scenario. In a study titled Quantifying Immersion in Virtual Reality by Posh et al. At the University of Virginia, 3 researchers set up an experiment where participants were divided into 2 groups. One was tasked with searching for targets with a traditional interface, and the second group were given a VR interface to use. Chief among their conclusions was that, quote, when there was no target present, VR users concluded this substantially faster than traditional users. We believe that VR users built a better mental frame of reference for the space and avoided redundant searching. That serves as a functional demonstration that VR not only increases presence in theory, but in practice as well. Also, because of research into the therapeutic effects of VR in the treatment of phobias, we also have hard physiological data in the form of sweat responses, skin temperature, skin resistance, and survey data on presence, all of which positively implicate VR as a tool that can induce environments of controlled horror. Again, getting back to horror games specifically, VR is still in its infancy and it's already reducing grown men to tears. No! Oh no! Oh no! 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 No!
I can't do it. Oh, I can't do that. Wow. I am actually crying. I couldn't do it. I really couldn't do it. Oh my.
Now, you have to take Markiplier's reactions with a grain of salt, as his walkthroughs of other horror games demonstrate a pattern of histrionics, but his reactions to a VR game titled Dread Halls stand out as particularly intense. At E3, Capcom was showing off a proof-of-concept VR horror demo called The Kitchen. Reactions to that were not only remarkably intense, they were consistently intense. The scenario apparently begins with a player character tied to a chair before being set upon by some ghastly, murderous demon. One of the demon's first interactions with the player is to stab the player's character in the leg. I'll let Kotaku Australia's Chris Yeager take over from here. Quote, "The fact I was inside the movie instead of watching it on a screen made it infinitely more terrifying. My brain actually triggered a spasm in my thigh as the knife went in. Later," he writes, "I spotted the knife on the floor, which must have been dropped during the previous scuffle. If I could somehow reach it with my foot," end quote. He trails off and then picks up. It was at that moment that the worst part of the demo transpired. The demon's gnarled fingers slowly slid over my eyes from behind and yanked my head back hard. Later on, simply put, no other home entertainment experience provides this level of immersion. This is anecdotal, yes. This is one testimonial, yes, but it's one in a sea of similar rundowns I've read. Not only is the theory there, the proof of concepts are starting to emerge and they're looking very, very promising. VR is still on the fringe. It hasn't become pervasive. It's not even clear if it will be, because A, one of the pioneering VR headsets, the Oculus Rift, isn't even available in mainstream hands, and B, there's still concerns over motion sickness, but again, there's reason to believe that the horror genre has a bright future in virtual reality, and I'm eager to experience that. Again, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Tiny Voices. I'm sure I'll have lots to say about VR in the future, and once again, if you have any comments or feedback or suggestions for topics that you want to see in the future, please let me know in the comments below. Speaking of which, if you like this series and you like what I do here on the channel, and you want to support me in just the smallest of ways, please leave a comment, hit that like button, subscribe, do all that cool stuff, tell your friends, and if you want to show your support to the channel monetarily and help me produce more awesome content like this, you can subscribe to me over on Patreon at patreon.com/scribe. That's going to do it for episode 3 of Tiny Voices. Next episode will be up at the same time next week, Saturday, August 22nd at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take it easy. Have a good one.